All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over Murox ASP.NET 4.6 Web Programming with C# 2015 6th edition. I am in the middle of Chapter 3, and in particular on page 104, where we're going to start talking about the inclusion of Bootstrap into the ASP.NET framework. I've broken tradition, so to speak, a little bit from what I've been doing thus far, and what I have done is I have brought up the author's Chapter 3 pre and post Bootstrap versions. It looks a little bit different than mine does, but I just wanted to bring it up here and run it for you and show you a couple things about this. So again, this is the author's. It's basically the same. The C# code is the same. The CSS is a little bit different, but you'll notice it looks very similar to what I have shown you from mine. There it is. All right. Now, one thing about this, notice if I start jacking a little bit here with my screen size, hopefully what you're noticing is it's not exactly responsive. All right. In fact, let's make this a little bit bigger here. Make it like this. Now let's cut down the screen size. And you see that basically it's not at all responsive. All right, so we're going to look at that first of all. And then we're going to bring up the Bootstrap version and talk about what has changed here. And then we're going to run the app again under Bootstrap, or a Bootstrap version of it. And you'll notice, yes, it does look different, but when we start to shrink the screen size, notice what happens. It is fully responsive. All right? So that's, more than anything else, that's what you get when you start using Bootstrap. Now, if I come in here and I type in responsive web, I'll just say web design, that's fine. Web design defined. Okay, and you can go all over the place to get definitions, but here's one. An approach to web design aimed at allowing desktop pages to be viewed in response to the size of a screen or web browser one is viewing with. In English, what that means is the website will adapt or adjust to whatever size medium it is being shown on. So the idea, again, what I just showed you here in the run, with this responsive one, this one, is, for example, if I'm looking at it on a desktop, it'll look like this. Desktop or probably a laptop. If I look at it on a tablet, watch how the Jumbotron starts. See how there's a breakpoint there where it starts changing size. And there's another breakpoint. All right? Now, in the past, this was done primarily through the use of media queries, and they're still used today. But what we're going to talk about in this particular chapter is how to achieve many of these effects using Bootstrap. So that's what I tried to show you. So in the book, they show you on pages 104 and 105 the responsive future value application shown at different screen sizes. And that's what I was trying to show you. Again, when a web app correctly, and correctly is, I guess, a matter of personal opinion, but when it tries, at least attempts to adapt to each and every and any screen size, that's responsive web design. So this is typically done using either CSS media queries or Bootstrap, or maybe even a combination of both. You can use Bootstrap to implement responsive web design in ASP.NET. And the way that Bootstrap will do this is via a combination of CSS and JavaScript to adjust the layout of the web page based on the width of the web page. Now, just so you see this, and I've shown it to you before, but I want to mention it to you again. Let's see if I still have that. So I've got these future values. And I don't remember what all of them are. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually start up another version of Visual Studio. I'm going to just do this quickly. But I want it, this is to show you a point. All right. When we started doing the future value, we did File, New, Website. But what we chose in there was an empty website. Notice if instead I change an ASP.NET web form site, and I'm just going to call this dummy. I want to get rid of it. So you may or may not remember this takes a little bit longer to build because there are a lot of files that have to be created for us in the background. Whereas with the empty project, all we had was the web.config. So it's building. I don't really need this start page up here anymore. Sooner or later that'll go away. There we go. And notice what we have now, if you would. We've got a scripts directory. It's got a bunch of jQuery in it. We've got a fonts directory with a bunch of glyphicons in it. All right. And we have, there's a favicon, there's a few other things, but the point here is, if I go and run this right now, hopefully you remember this. I did this back, I believe, in Chapter 1. But what we have, there we go. This is a Bootstrap-enabled CSS website. Notice if I start to change the size, how it adapts. See that? So you get that by default when you create an ASP.NET Web Forms. You don't get it by default. You don't get it by default when you do an empty project. So we're going to have to look at how that stuff gets added. All right, so notice there's a Jumbotron class, and it says ASP.NET is a free framework, etc., etc. So all that's in that big Jumbotron at the top. And then when we look in here, Bootstrap is very div-based. Okay, so we've got a row, and then we've got 4 columns, followed by 4 columns, followed by 4 columns. Hopefully you remember the secrets of 12, so to speak, with Bootstrap, that every row, the columns in there must equal 12 in any way you want. 1 12 times, 12 once, 4 3 times, 3 4 times, 2 6 times, 6 2 times, or any other derivation. All right? So I'm going to stop the run here at least. Jump back into slides. So again, just keep that in mind. For lack of better words, it's sort of a little primer for you as we get started on this particular part. So again, there it is at a tablet width, there it is at a smartphone width. All right. So on pages 106 and 107, the author talks about how do we actually add Bootstrap to a web application. And what they mention is you could use that NuGet package manager, the same one we use to add jQuery, we can use it to add Bootstrap to a web app. Then you add Bootstrap to a form by adding the link in script tags shown in the head element that's on the middle of page 107. The link tag for the Bootstrap CSS should be coded before the link tag for your own CSS files, because your own files may end up overwriting those. The script tag for the jQuery should come before the script tag for the Bootstrap JavaScript file, because Bootstrap depends on jQuery. After you've added these tags, Visual Studio provides Bootstrap IntelliSense. And one of the things that we'll see in here is the word viewport. Viewport is the part of the page that's visible to viewers. So this viewport meta tag is going to be used to control the width of the viewport and the page's initial zoom when it first loads. Well, maybe that made sense, and maybe it just sounded like I was reading, and to an extent that's what I was doing. I don't need this dummy project anymore. But what I want to do is I want to come in here and find my ASP.NET folder. All right, I'm going to copy this future value 3, and I'm going to copy it to future value 3b. All right, and I'm going to open that up. In fact, I'm going to open it up like this by starting up yet another session of Visual Studio. Got to watch it, because if you open up too many sessions, you're going to get confused. The system never will. It'll always do what you want it to do. The problem is, if you don't know what you want it to do, it's still going to do that anyway. So here's future value 3b. And I'm using copies of all this stuff, so in case I screw it up, which is quite a possibility, that's all I'm playing with, are just the copies. So for this project, I'm again going to right mouse click on the project in the Solution Explorer. Remember, that's a solution. Whenever it tells you to click on a project, you click on a project here. A solution can contain multiple projects. We don't get into that in this class, but it is possible to do that. So I'm right mouse clicking on here, and I'm choosing Manage NuGet Packages. We looked at that before. Solution is not saved. Please save your solution. Oh, crud. Well, I don't like to save these, but I'm going to try doing it anyway and see if I can get it to save to the right place. So it's desktop, ASP.NET, future value 3B. There, now it's saved. So right mouse click, manage NuGet packages. All right, so we want to click browse just like we did before. All right, and in our search box, we want to make sure, as it says there, that the NuGet.org, all right, and I haven't done this before, so I apologize in advance. All right, right-click on the project in the Solution Explorer and select Manage NuGet Packages. Did it. In the page that appears, click Browse. Make sure that NuGet.org is selected in the Package Source drop-down box. There it is. Select Bootstrap from the packages that appear on the left page. Somewhere in here. What if I type in here Bootstrap? There it is. We're told to click on the Install button to add both Bootstrap and jQuery files that Bootstrap needs. So I'm doing that right now. It says it's about to make these changes, telling it okay. And you may or may not have been able to tell, but it again added those fonts, added those scripts, etc. So that's there now. I should now be able to close this and just look at what's here. Again, these are the ones that I opened from the book, so I'm going to close that. All right, and let's take a look here. In fact, let's close all the other ones that we have up and running. A lot of stuff open here. Well, hopefully that was everything. All right, so this was future value 3B. I'm going to tell it to run. All right, you can see it doesn't look very bootstrap-ish yet. All right, but what did we do? We used the NuGet package manager to add Bootstrap to our project. Now we have to add Bootstrap to our web form by adding the link and script tags that are shown on page 107. So I'm going to keep that there. And I'm going to come in and add these tags that they talk about in here. So it says we want to make sure to add the Bootstrap tags. All right, we want to add that before any of our own CSS, so I'm putting that up here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a meta tag. Oh, there's our external CSS. In fact, yeah, this is good. Let's put a title on here. We'll call it bootstrapped future value. Okay? All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and put in this meta tag. Notice that for viewport, the system recognizes that because it's a keyword, so it's recognized in the IntelliSense. This is basically telling it width equal device width. For lack of better words, what it's saying is let the size of the device figure out what my width is going to be. And initial scale equal 1 should mean make it 1%. All right, so there's that stuff. It's not showing me any errors, so that's always a good sign. Again, I'm just copying the stuff that's shown on the middle of page 107. Actually, that already is mine. I don't know if we need this one. I don't think I've got one called Site. Just got my styles. So there's content. And there's bootstrap theme. So under content, is there a site? CSS. I don't see one. This should give me everything, hopefully, that I need. Let's put in our script tags right here as well. And remember, we don't have to even do this. I can remove that, go under my scripts, find, and it's changed since this book was shown, but we want the minified, so I'm just going to drop this in. There it is. So we've got 3.1 here as opposed to what they show in your textbook. And we're going to put the bootstrap min JS file in here also. Okay? That should be everything that they show on the middle of page 107. The classes of the Bootstrap grid system on pages 108 and 109. Again, Bootstrap uses a grid system. Let's jump back into our textbook here. Just did all that for you. All right, some of the classes are shown here, and this is the slide from the top of page 109 in your book. The container class contains rows and other content. It's centered in the body element. The container fluid contains rows and other content. It's set to 100% of the width of the viewport. The row contains the columns inside of a container. The size count are the number of columns. Remember, it has to ideally equal 12. It can never equal more than 12. The col size offset is the number of columns an element should be moved to the right on a specified screen size. Those valid screen sizes or size values that are shown there. Large is for a screen with a width greater than or equal to 1200 pixels. For example, a large desktop. 992 is medium, and that's a screen with a width greater than or equal to pretty much a regular desktop size, which is 992 pixels. Medium, which is a screen width greater than or equal to 768 pixels. That's about tablet sized. So that's, I just mentioned, that's large, that's medium. This one, I think I said SM for small, but if I didn't, it's small. And then the last one is XS for extra small. which is a screen with a width less than 768 pixels, typically a mobile phone. So again, Bootstrap uses a grid system based on containers, rows, and columns. Columns are contained inside of rows, which are contained inside of containers. All rows should be in a container. Each row can contain no more than 12 columns. The default behavior for a row element is to span all 12 columns. So the elements of a row will stack vertically in all screen sizes if you don't assign a column CSS class. You can assign a different column class to an element for each screen size to specify the number of columns the element should span in those sizes. So for instance, looking back at our example, just as an example here, stop the run here, if I got any more running or not, but so this was the author's copy here. So we can take that table, for example, and assign it different values based on once this starts to expand or contract. If you don't assign a column class for a screen size, the class for the next smallest screen will be used. Again, if you want more of an explanation than the one I just gave you, you can take a look at what's in the book on 108 and 109. Here are some examples. Again, column equal 4, the element will automatically span 4 columns. All right, and that's on a medium-sized device. Remember, that device, that MD, is again used for a standard desktop size. We can take the same thing and say 4 columns on a standard desktop, 3 columns on a larger desktop. So it'll be 3 or 4 columns depending on the type of medium. And there's an example of offsetting. So again, there's a bootstrap on a medium screen, all right, on a small screen, and on an extra small screen. But the idea is if you set your stuff up correctly, you're not really the one who's worrying about setting this up correctly based on the width. Once you set it up in your CSS and you call and set the right bootstrap classes, for lack of better words, it's done for you automatically. All right. So the HTML for this, here, here, and here, is shown here, and it's also in your book on the bottom of page 111. All right. Well, Bootstrap is particularly good at working with forms, all right? And some of the Bootstrap CSS classes for working with forms, this slide that's right here is also shown in your book in the table that's on the top of page 113. Form vertical, the form labels and controls stack vertically, which is the default. Form horizontal, typically used to align labels and controls. Form group, which applies spacing and labels to controls that go together. Form control, which applies styling to input text areas and other form controls. And control label, which applies styling to a control's label. So here's an example. As it says, here are 2 text boxes with a vertical layout. That's the default. And shown below the picture would be the code that you would use in order to be able to accomplish that. So there's a vertical layout where each thing is in its own row. There's a horizontal layout. Notice the biggest difference between these is this says class equal form group. This says class equal form group, but above that for the form it says class is form horizontal. Here it says nothing, so it defaults to the vertical. Here we set it to horizontal. Other than that, these are pretty close to the same thing. Some of the Bootstrap CSS classes used for working with buttons are shown on pages 114 and 115. BTN is the button class. By default, it produces a simple gray button that has dark text and rounded corners. Button default changes the background color to white and it adds a border to the button. Button primary adds emphasis by changing the background color to blue and the text to white. And there's other ones that you can set as well. Talked about this before, but again, if I go out here and I go out to getbootstrap.com and I start looking in here, it's either under CSS or components, but let's start with CSS here. And there's buttons. So here are the different kinds of buttons that you can create. You notice that they're colored differently. All right. You see what the default looks like, but every other one has got white text, but the color is more indicative of what it is you're working with. Bootstrap also allows you to work with images. Again, this is always your best place to go. So if I go to images here, there's images rounded, which adds rounded corners to an image. Which, again, that doesn't work in older versions of IE. And there's responsive, which makes the image automatically adjust to fit the size of the viewport. These are what you have by default. There's rounded that they talked about with the rounded corners. There's circle. There's thumbnail. And in your book, they show you the code pretty much that corresponds to this stuff. All right. I guess it's not shown in the slides, but it's on the bottom of page 115. So that gets us to the Bootstrap version of the future value calculator. Now this Jumbotron that you see right here in the example, I don't even know if this is shown in the book. I guess it is. Yep, this is the code on the bottom. The figure on the middle of page 115, and that's the associated code on the bottom of 115. This could be like, not a splash screen, but I guess you could, in a way, call it that, where you won't show the regular future value screen until they indeed accept the terms for the site. And again, header, class is Jumbotron. That's going to create all this thing in the gray box here. All right. Image, rounded, image responsive. That's going to be for the buttons. They're going to be rounded. All right. Got a primary button and a default button. There's the primary, there's the default. Okay. Notice that the whole thing will be inside of basically a big form tag, and everything is enclosed within a div tag. So starting on 116 and going 116, 117, 118, and 119, really the rest of the chapter shows the ASPX code for the future value application. All right, this is figure 320, which again is on page 117 in your textbook. The head element of the page starts with a viewport meta tag. All right, you can see the meta tag in the yellow there. And that's followed by the link tags for the Bootstrap style sheet and the custom style sheet, which is site.css. And again, that is shown also in the yellow. Because the link tag is coded after the link tag for the Bootstrap style sheet, its styles can override those provided by Bootstrap. Next, the two script tags, or JS tags, are put in to include the JavaScript files for jQuery and the JavaScript files for Bootstrap. Bootstrap uses the jQuery library, and again, its script tag must be coded after the jQuery because it'll override some of the stuff that's in there. The body element contains the div that's uses the container class so that the page is centered and it adjusts correctly to the width of its viewport. Inside of the header is the image element and an H1 element. The main element contains the form element that uses the form horizontal class, so the stuff is side by side. There's I think 3 different form groups in here. The first one contains the monthly investment label and drop-down list. The second and third are used for the interest rate and the number of years, respectively. Then there's a fourth form group that contains the label showing the future value calculation, and the fifth one which contains the calculate and the clear buttons. No column classes are included for small and extra small devices. So by default, those will be full screen and will be stacked vertically. Okay? So finally, the last thing that's shown in here is the custom style sheet. And this says, as mentioned, you want your H1 tag that's inside of your Jumbotron to be 250%. The container should have a solid 1 pixel border around it, which is, I think, a flavor of gray, the pound CE. And the future value will be bolded. All right. The last thing that's shown here is the one that they give you, I believe, is an exercise at the end of the chapter. So remember, you can add your own CSS style sheet to override the default Bootstrap styles or to add new styles. Creating a separate style sheet is preferred over making changes to Bootstrap. All right, you should always not change the Bootstrap or the master one, so to speak. You should make your own. That's pretty much it as far as I can tell for Chapter 3. Now that was quick. When we get to Chapter, I believe it's Chapter 10 in the book. You'll notice that that's got 74 slides. That's all on Bootstrap. So we're going to come back and hit this again in a later lecture. When I come back in a few minutes, I'm going to start going over Chapter 4, which is how to develop a multi-page web application. I have no idea whether I can get that done in one lecture or not. All right, so I'll be back with that very shortly.